Good morning. Happy Sweet Talk Sunday. My name is Cordelia Gaffar. I'm the ultimate joy goddess and the CEO of Cordelia Gaffar Enterprises. I guide women to choose pleasure so that they can enjoy multi-orgasmic living. Today, I want to share a very important message with you. Why is it, right, that sometimes women choose not to um, they why do they not choose pleasure, right? Let's talk about that. So before I get into what I want to talk about, I'm going to tell you a little bit of my story, right? So once upon a time, just over 9 years ago, I created um, my business called Workout Around My Day, right? I now DBA as Cordelia Gaffar Enterprises, but Workout Around My Day is a play on words. And what I desire most deeply is for women, especially mothers, right, to choose to create sustainable practices of self nurturing. Now, I came to this because I personally, as a mother of 6 children, that I was homeschooling, saw the daunting task, right? Even before I decided to stay home and home educate, I was a working mom, right? So I worked in corporate for a tech company, married. I guess that time we had 2 little kids, right? Um, like a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and it was overwhelming, right? I live in the DMV, the District of Columbia metropolitan area is just like any other metropolitan area when it comes to what is that called? Commuting and all those things, right? So it was a lot, right? So you 2 hours to work, 2 hours back from work, drop the kids at the daycare, pick up the husband if you work close enough. In our case, we did. Our offices were about 10 miles away from each other, so it was either he picked me up or I picked him up, and then we went to go get the kids, which the daycare was near our house. And then, right, it really begins because then you gotta, you know, get the kids to decompress and make food and all the things. So even with the meal planning and all the things ahead of time, it just is a lot. It's overwhelming. And I found myself constantly having heart palpitations. I had headaches. I couldn't fall asleep at night. And I knew that this wasn't the way that I wanted to live. It's not what I wanted for my family. Most of all, it wasn't what I wanted for myself. It's not what I grew up with. I didn't see my mom struggle like that, and my dad didn't struggle like that. And so, with the thought of the way I grew up and the way my parents lived, I thought, what is it that's missing? You see, because for those of you who don't know, you may not have read my book, Detached Love Transforming Your Heart So You Can Transform Your Mind, or any of my books. I've written 8 books total. You may not be aware that before I got married and had kids, both my parents had already passed. So, a lot of times as young mothers or even, as you're going through your parenting journey, you may have your parents' wisdom to go to, right? Go and ask your mom, go and ask your dad. I didn't have that. So I had to make it all up myself. And, that in itself could have been overwhelming, but I chose for it not to be overwhelming. And so instead, I chose to start creating ways to nurture myself, and that's how simple it started. So this happened 20 years ago because my oldest is now, she'll be 24 in August. So 20 years ago, one day I just decided, I gotta nurture myself. And, that's quite unusual, apparently, because when I shared this with my coworkers, they had a lot of judgment, and they slung a lot of shame over my way. They were like, "Girl, you need to take care of your family. Your number one responsibility as a woman is to take care of your man and take care of your children." And you know, I don't really care what people think, apparently, because if I did, I wouldn't be who I am today. But I thought to myself, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. How am I going to take care of somebody else if I can't take care of myself? If I feel like I need help. And if I need help, why can't I ask for help? Right? And who would I ask for help? So, one more thing about me, when I first became a mother and first got married, right? Not only were both my parents dead, I have three older sisters who had, well-established families, and they lived in different states. And I had recently become Muslim, right? So I had a whole new set of friends. And the standards for Muslim women were even higher than the standards for Black women, right? So Black women have to wear a cape, but Muslim women, now this is just like there's no like actual handbook that says Black women have to be a certain way. There's no handbook that says Muslim women have to be a certain way. Well, in fact, there is, but the handbook is a little bit like this. You take care of what you can take care of, and then you outsource the rest. And part of that outsourcing is your husband gets to do his own laundry and cook for himself, right? However, because we live in a world that is permeated by um, the colonized mind, and we all believe that the what's been taught to us for the past several centuries is that women must be the caretakers of the family and abandon themselves. How ridiculous is that? How many women are dying because they're abandoning their own self-nurturing and their own self-care? So this is the backstory for what I want to talk about today, right? I just want you to just take a minute and sit with the fact that that's just ludicrous, that you're supposed to take care of everyone else without even considering for 1 second how to take care of yourself. How is that even possible? You have to suck everything up. You can't you don't have anyone to really let your hair down with. You don't have anyone, like, how many times does anyone even say, "Hey, you're doing a great job, mom. Keep that up." We don't hear that. Most of these mom groups complain about complaining and complain about themselves, their kids, their husband, their this, their that. What if there was a world where we could give ourselves permission? Like when you go to those moms group and you say, "I'm tired." And the answer was, "Girl, I haven't slept since my oldest was born and I got 3 kids and he's 16." No. What if the answer instead was, "Go take a nap?" So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to give you 3 reasons to give yourself permission to self-nurture, okay? So, if you're just coming in now and you didn't hear the backstory, I really, really highly recommend and encourage you to go back and listen to the backstory. And now I will begin with the first thing. The number one reason to give yourself permission to self-nurture, may I ask you a question? Are you tired? Are you exhausted? Are you tired of being exhausted? So the number one reason to give yourself permission to self-nurture is you're tired of being exhausted. What is the remedy for that? The remedy for that is taking rest. Now, about 5 years ago, before I renamed my podcast, it was then called The Replenish Me Show. I interviewed Dr. Sandra. She has a hyphenated last name. Sandra, can't remember her last name. Anyway, she talks about the 7 types of rest, right? So there's 7 types of rest. So when by the time you get to be exhausted, that means that you have probably not given yourself permission to take advantage of any of those forms of rest. What I recall of my conversation with Dr. Sandra is what I'm going to call her because I can't remember her last name, is that there is creative rest. And I don't mean decorating your house. I mean, do something that you like to create, right? I enjoy cooking. So when I feel creative, I go into the kitchen and I create a meal. Now, in this case, it ends up serving two purposes, right? But maybe you're not someone who loves to cook. In fact, often most women I know, they don't love to cook, but I think they don't love to cook because they know that they're required to cook. But what if you cooked for the love of cooking and your children saw that you cooked for the love of cooking? Then guess what you would create? You would create an environment where many people in your house would love to cook and you would get off the hook with that. You see? So I will tell you my story with that. Because I love to cook, I research about food, I've found out about nutrition, and I know like a lot of things about a lot of things about food. I don't know everything, but I know the things that I need to know for what I love to do. And so if you allow yourself creative rest, then, perhaps you will inspire that in your children and in your husband, and by extension, get help. So in my story, I love to cook. My children saw that I love to cook and they got interested because your kids are interested in what you're interested in and they love you. And so as a result, all of my children can cook and they've been cooking since they were like little. So my sons, for example, my older son, who's now 21, he started cooking when he was about 7 or 8, just because he wanted to come and help me chop up the onions. And by the time he was 12, he took over, cooking some meals. And then, you know, um, his next sister down, my older one she's more of a baker. My His next sister down, who was about 10 around that time, she also enjoyed cooking, so she would look over his shoulder. So what I created with me nurturing my creative rest was more time to myself because now I have 6 children and 4 of my 6 children love to cook. And so I cook about 2 days a week. This was before my divorce, okay? So now I probably cook about 1 to 2 days a week now. So the number one reason is if you're tired of being exhausted, give yourself at least creative rest. And by extension, you may create some help for yourself. Okay, number 2, are you tired of nobody caring about your needs? Guess what? We teach people how to treat us. Nobody's going to care about your needs if you don't care about your needs. If they see that you stay up all night and you are the first one awake in the morning and you're always doing, why would they need to do anything? Right? Oh, mom will do it. She doesn't mind. Is what you're telling them, is what you're creating them to be people who take you for granted and care as little for what you need as you do. So I I started going on retreats. And it was very uncomfortable and very difficult because the first time I chose to go on a retreat, my youngest was, I think, 2 years old. And I mean, it was just in Baltimore. and it was just for the weekend, but it was very scary to say, "This weekend, I'm not gonna be here. I have a business retreat to go to," right? And, um, and I did it, and it was cut short because it was the first time and I didn't know how to advocate for myself, but it got easier to the point where, by the time my youngest was about 5 years old, I was gone about 12 weeks out of the year, as far away as Bali. I went to Bali for 10 or 13 days, and that was after coming back from another trip where I had gone for a week. And so I set the new tone even after 15 years of my family observing me of always being there and, not going away, right? I would go to my room and they would give me a couple of hours to do stuff, or I would go to like a dance class, or I would offer, a movement class or something like this. And they were okay with that. But for me to actually say, look, I need some real respite. I'm leaving. That was an uncomfortable adjustment for everybody involved. And it was a requirement for me, for my survival. So I highly encourage you to leave your house as often as possible, right? You get, what is the average? About 4 to 5 weeks, off. Yeah, I know that's not the average. Somewhere around 2 to 5 weeks off per year from your job, right? And I highly encourage that you take one of those weeks just for yourself. And, I'm not going to pitch any of my retreats right now, but I'm just saying, consider going on a retreat. I will be going to Bali later this year, and I'll talk about that in future talks. But today, I really, really, really want to hone in on the idea of 3 reasons to give yourself permission to self nurture. So, number one, if you're tired of being exhausted, that's a reason. Number two, nobody is going to care any more for your needs than you do. The last reason is, are you tired of not having time for yourself, right? So, why don't you have time for yourself? You're scheduling everybody's activities. It's okay. Just like you probably have on your calendar date night with your husband. And if you don't, please do that. You can have on your calendar date night for mom. And if you have a family calendar, even better. That way, everybody knows that mom is having a date with mom. Yeah, that's a thing. It really is a thing. And you can even schedule it where you're having um, not just a date with yourself, but different activities, right? So you can have date with yourself, and that could just be 3 hours where you're taking a nap, staring at the ceiling, doing whatever you want. In addition to those things, I would highly recommend you have a, massage scheduled in there, yoga class, somatic movement class, exercise class, like at least 1 hour every day. Some form of communal movement, right? And maybe you want to schedule time for you to read. Just sit down and read. There's so many books that you probably want to read and you're listening on Audible. Audible is great. And there's nothing in the world like holding a book in your hand, right? And I don't really care if that dates me or whatever, but me personally, I mean, not just because I'm an author, but I like to hold a book in my hand. And I have lots and lots of books, not just the ones I've written. And so I encourage you to schedule time for yourself, right? Time is a creation of man, actually. And I don't mean to tangent here, but we constrict ourselves by our choices. It's not time that constricts us. And so you have choices on how to use the hours that you're given. You don't know how many hours or how many minutes you get every day. We assume that we will make it to the end of the day, but anything can happen. And so, my encouragement here is to cherish your time. Do not give it away freely and don't take it for granted. And don't let anybody else take it for granted. This is the number one reason to self nurture. Your calendar should be like gold. No, everyone should not have access to that. So, I'm going to recap what I've shared with you today. 3 reasons to give yourself permission to self nurture. You're already exhausted. Nobody cares about your needs, and you don't have any time for yourself. And if you like living like that, by all means, don't self nurture. But if it's weighing you down, if it's killing you, if it's causing you depression, if it's causing you physical illness, if it's destroying your relationships, it's time to make a change. It's time to take your self nurturing seriously. It is not a dirty word. Self nurturing is the best thing that you can do for yourself on the planet. And I highly encourage you to begin today. Below this video and in the description, there is a link to sign up for my next workshop, Ginger Bites, right? These Ginger Bite workshops are about creating your joy bubble within and also create some somatic awareness, reconnecting to your body. Perhaps you don't know what your needs are because you're so disconnected from them. You're disconnected from your body. You can't feel your body anymore because of years of abuse and neglect. You've missed so many nights of sleep and so many days of exercise and so many opportunities to eat food that is appropriate for your body, not healthy food, right? Not superfoods. All foods are not super for everybody. And all healthy foods are not healthy for everybody. Take the time, take the interest, and be curious. What is good for my body? What works well for me? What exercises are good for me? Not what's the latest trend. Somatic exercises are good for everybody, but not all of the somatic exercises are good for everybody. You understand? So there's some bodies that require more movements in certain energy centers in certain areas than others. And there's some bodies that, require less. But you'll never know if you don't get curious about it. So that is my encouragement for you today. And until next time, be free.